Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and thanks for watching. Well, subprime mortgage, is it a crisis? What's going on? Well, we're going to let you in on some of the basic facts relative to subprime mortgages in the state of Pennsylvania. But first, our popular legislative update after these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to Newsmakers again. Let me first start out by saying mortgage reform in Pennsylvania, how important is it? Well, in the second part of the program, we're going to get into that in great detail with some experts, folks who know more about it than I do, and it's an important couple of segments that I'm sure you're not going to want to miss. But first, our legislative update. Joining me this week, as often is the case, is Brad Bumsted. He's a reporter with the Pittsburgh Tribune Review and a columnist, along with Robert Swift from the Times-Shamrock newspapers. And I have to make a point. The Scranton Times, and at least, come on, get it out.
Citizens Voice in Wilkes-Barre, you have papers in Pottsville and Hazleton and Shamokin in the Northeast region.
All over the Northeast, and you got the Southwest part of the state covered, right?
Numerous papers in the Southwest.
So we got at least two parts of the state. All right. What a week in Pennsylvania politics. The legislature's out of session. But a bombshell, Brad, was dropped on the Harrisburg political and legal community with the announced resignation of Justice Ralph Cappy, who was at the center of the pay hike situation, defending it. He's the Chief Justice of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. He says at the end of the year, I'm leaving. What's that all about?
People were stunned by this, and partly by the timing, that this came on 9/11. Why would he announce it on 9/11?
Yeah, a little surprising.
Unless he was trying to, downplay the play that this would get in the newspapers the next day. It's not clear, but of course he said it was for reasons that he wants to spend more time with his kids. Apparently he had some major surgery, and he wants to do that, and you have to take him at his word. But the speculation I hear is that may all be true, but that he'd had it up to where in terms of the pay raise. He took enormous amount of criticism over the gambling decision that he was part of. Yet, when you look at Judge Cappy, as much as he is despised by some of the reformers, there'll be a lot of people out there that will tell you he's been a really progressive judge on the court, has brought more openness and has brought other things to the court that so he's got a mixed legacy as he leaves.
Let me follow up with that, Robert. We always get into these situations where we're trying to guess the motives. I mean, it's very, very difficult to do. Brad raised the obvious point. Some cynics will say he's leaving because he has to face his own retention election in the next cycle, which would be, 2009?
That's correct. And
that he just simply doesn't want to go before the voters, and he would be target number one by the reform groups in the state.
That's correct. They already indicated it. And in his statement, he did defend the pay raise. He defended higher pay for the judiciary, so he went out with his guns blazing on that issue. But certainly, I doubt you would want your legacy to be a defeat in a retention vote in the state.
And go ahead.
Well, and Ralph Cappy, did go out of his way to defend the pay raise, and he would be targeted. People would come out of the woodwork to defeat him, and I seriously don't think he could win retention.
I mean, I think getting further into sort of some speculation, I don't think that folks were so upset about giving judges more pay. I don't think that was ever the issue. I think a lot of folks would agree that judges, lawyers have to be compensated fairly. It was probably the process that upset people and the meetings that took place, private meetings between executive branch and legislative and judicial leaders, not transparent, and that was maybe the root of the problem.
There's this whole concept of whether the courts and the legislative branch have been in collusion on issues like the pay raise and earlier issues when the court would uphold a legislative midnight move. And the question now in the future, will we, as incumbents leave the court, will we start to see more of a separation of powers between the two branches?
Yeah, let me go quickly to another topic. As we return this fall and into next year, we've got the Supreme Court, we've got a grand jury looking into whether or not bonuses given to legislative staff were in fact paid monies for political activity. We've got the coming trial of Senator Fumo for 139 counts of public corruption. We have the DeNaples situation up in the Northeast. This is a casino. This is a guy who wants to build a casino who has some difficulties with his past. Brad, are we back into another one of these cycles where it's just going to be one scandal story after another?
It has the potential for that. It's not clear whether these things will rise to that level. How far is Attorney General Tom Corbett's bonus investigation going to go? There's a grand jury meeting in Harrisburg on DeNaples' application to become a slot license owner. Did he lie on that application? That's the issue. It's not, there's no evidence we know of that he did. So will these things rise to that level? What will happen with the Fumo case? Fumo could be acquitted.
Sure.
So we don't know, but if all these things come together, it could be volatile.
But we're going to go to a break. But would you both agree these are major stories that will be followed intently by the political community in this state for the next several months?
They will drive events, and maybe...
They will drive events. All right, when we come back, we're going to turn to legislative business. The legislature comes back next week, dealing with a whole host of topics, smoking ban, energy. We've talked about those before. We'll take those subjects up and more after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Pennsylvania Medical Society. Doctors and patients, preserve the relationship. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to the program with Brad Bumsted and Robert Swift, journalists all. Robert, one of the big agenda items that the governor will push pretty hard will be his energy initiative. He originally wanted $800 million in bonds for a bunch of energy technology innovations in the state. The Republicans in the Senate in particular have balked and say, no way, no how. The governor proposed originally that a surcharge be placed on consumer and business electric bills. Take it from there. What's the situation as the legislature returns?
Well, we're going to have one of these special sessions that are supposed to focus attention on an issue. They go along with the normal session, but it gives the governor a chance to give an address before the lawmakers on September 24th on his energy plan. Then you're going to have a long drag-out fight, and probably in the days before Christmas we've seen maneuver on this issue. I do think it's going to go down to the wire as to the scope of the program and how far to go with it and how far to limit it.
Brad, throughout the summer months there's been a kabuki dance going on between the Senate Republicans and the governor. Senate Republicans arguing that they'd given too much to Governor Rendell, that they were upset over the negotiations that ended the budget. In other words, soured relationships between the Senate Republicans and the governor. Does this play into this energy debate?
There's no question about it, Terry. It looked like when they left here in July that there was an agreement to do Governor Rendell's proposed Jonas Salk Fund for biomedical research, but the Senate Republicans said, no, we didn't really agree to that. There's no time to consider it because you put something else on the table, so that's going to have to go till later in the year. They're just not going to do it right away. And then, in terms of the energy program, Rendell, of course, had been pushing the $800 million program that you described. The Senate Republicans said, we'll do $60 million a year. But when I left here in July, after the recess, I thought there was sort of an agreement to do the $60 million a year. And now I hear Rendell is back pushing his original plan.
Well, there wouldn't be any, Robert, would there be any reason for a special session if we're just, I mean, they don't need a special session to do $60 million of anything, do they? $800 million maybe, but not, go ahead.
Not at all. It's just a way to, a way to, to sort of frame an issue, make it seem like it's very important, number one on the agenda, but they really have no reason at all. They have a different color calendar paper for the bills.
Yeah.
And that's really the significance of it.
Well, but that'll force the press in the state. I mean, you're obviously going to have to focus on it when they go in. I mean, that would be obvious, more focused attention on it. Go ahead.
Well, that's true. But I think the whole reason we're having a special session is you remember that budget agreement in July was global. It included all sorts of different parts and moving parts. that were part of the deal. And I think part of the deal was to enable the governor to save face, since they weren't going to do his $800 million energy program, say, yeah, we'll do a special session.
Sure.
Legislative leaders do not like special sessions to begin with. They really don't care for them. So I don't expect a great deal of energy to be expended.
And energy on energy. All right, before I let you go, smoking ban, campaign finance, this is a pretty, plus Rendell's ambitious agenda on some other issues, this looks like it's going to be one of the busiest fall calendars the legislature has taken up in a number of years. Robert, you're sort of the journalist, historian here. Am I right or wrong about that?
It's going to be busy. You also have the transportation issue in there.
That's
we're going
correct.
to revisit that. I don't. My sense
leasing,
is
back to leasing the turnpike, right?
My sense is that for all the busyness, I don't think a lot's going to be accomplished.
Really?
I think the battle lines are going to be drawn, and it's going to be more governed by the outside events, the potential retirements of lawmakers, the elections coming up, and possibly these investigations will start to overtake.
And before we go, we have these important, and we'll get into this later before the election in November, but we've got the retention election of Justice Saylor caught up in a sense in all of this turmoil that's been going on outside of the court.
Good point.
And so that's another factor in all of this.
It is, but I concur with RB that, you know, we're going to see all kinds of activity and press conferences and hearings, but in the end, we'll be lucky to see a minimal energy bill passed of some sort and maybe open records. I hear not much else.
Smoking ban?
It's so hard to get an
because
agreement.
there's so many differences on the on what should be exempted. All right, as always, great update. All right, when we come back, it's subprime mortgage time. Boy, this is a couple of segments you don't want to miss. We'll be back following these messages.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, you've heard an awful lot about SubPrime mortgages. It's been mostly a national story, but we're going to bring it home to you right now at this moment. The Pennsylvania story with Vicki Reider. She's the Executive Deputy Secretary in the Department of Banking, and Rick Wargo, who is the General Counsel for the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association of Pennsylvania and often a frequent guest on this program. All right, Victoria, let me start with you. Let's get right into... We've heard an awful lot in the national news about the subprime mortgage situation nationally.
Yes.
But actually not a lot about its effect in Pennsylvania. Talk to our viewers now about the scope of the problem in the state as you in the banking department see it now.
Pennsylvania has traditionally had a higher foreclosure rate than the national rate. Now, it's declined slightly in the first 6 months of 2007. Nonetheless, 1 in every 335 Pennsylvanians are facing foreclosure this year. That number is due to increase because of adjustable rate mortgages, many of which were written in 2005 and 2006, and those mortgages are due to uptick within the next year and a half. So we will be seeing more of a problem with respect to the adjustable rate market.
Okay, so what you're saying basically is that at the moment, Pennsylvania is probably not, we're not worse off than most states. We're probably about in the same category. Is this substantially different than the national picture, would you say?
We're not California, Florida, or those high real estate markets. But nonetheless, we are seeing some serious issues. Just last year, for example, we get approximately 6,000 consumer complaints. 30% of those have dealt with mortgage-related problems. It definitely is an increasing issue in the Commonwealth.
All right. Now, overall, the subprime mortgage the number of people who have subprime mortgages is not a huge number of the total folks who have mortgages, agreed?
Correct.
But it obviously has a very significant impact on those individuals who do have, who have taken out these mortgages, where we've got the variable rates, now because of the Fed, I guess, interest rates rising, their rates are rising, and is the fundamental problem that too many people took mortgages they should not have, or they were sort of seduced into these mortgages by aggressive tactics of lenders?
I think you have a mix of all of the above,
Yeah.
Terry. It is easy for the consumer to get seduced by the home, in addition to which a lot of people get to the closing table, you're handed a pile of documents this thick, and the
who
consumer...
reads them?
Well, that's the point.
I never read one of them.
You've got to read them. Your home is your most important investment. For most consumers, the biggest investment they're going to make, and I can't urge a consumer enough.
Yeah.
Know how that mortgage instrument is going to behave, know how it's going to price itself, and have people at that settlement table with you who are your advocate to make sure you understand and your questions are answered.
Yeah, it's sort of the buyer beware. Go ahead.
I'd like to follow up,
Yeah,
too, on Rick's
absolutely.
point. In terms of that pile of documents that consumers receive, that is definitely an issue. There was a study that the FTC did that 20% of consumers have no idea of the type of mortgage they're getting into. Is it a fixed mortgage? Is it an adjustable rate mortgage?
I know that. That part I at least know, but go ahead.
Well, and because of that, the Pennsylvania Department of Banking has come up with a regulation that's now pending before the Independent Regulatory Review Commission to ensure that consumers receive a one-page simplified disclosure document that explains to them, what is your mortgage? Is it fixed? Is it variable? Does it escrow for taxes and insurance? What are the terms of your mortgage? How high could your payment go? Does it have a balloon payment at the end of the mortgage? Is it a negative amortization type of mortgage? Which
I guess what you're saying is that this process is not exactly consumer friendly, and maybe over the years, in order to protect people, there are so many rules and regulations that all of a sudden, Rick, you're a lawyer, you're looking at something that only a lawyer could understand.
Well, the settlement is very intimidating, and some of the consumer protection regulations, your Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act protections, while they are well intended, it is difficult for the consumer to sift through them. It is a vocabulary that the consumer is not used to dealing with.
All right, we're going to run to a quick break. The Department of Banking did a foreclosure study. I want to talk with Victoria about that, and a warning about the prospect that a crisis in submortgage lending could actually have occurred. A study done 3 years ago. We'll be back with that following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Penn Future, where we believe that every environmental victory grows the economy, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. We're chatting about mortgage reform in Pennsylvania in the wake of the subprime mortgage situation nationally and in the state as well. Victoria, let me go back to you. A couple of years ago, the banking department looked at this whole business of foreclosures. How many were there? Who in fact was being foreclosed on, if I can end the sentence with the word on? What did you find?
We undertook a study in Monroe County when it was discovered that numerous New York residents were being lured to the idyllic Poconos with some collusion occurring between builders and appraisers, where home values were misrepresented, where there was loan flipping. There actually were some criminal investigations undertaken by the Attorney General's office. Thereafter, the House of Representatives asked us to undertake a statewide study, which we did, and based upon that study, we've come up with a 6-bill legislative package package, one of which deals with the issue that you mentioned, Terry, with respect to how many are there. Well, there is no statewide mechanism for capturing the number of foreclosures, and so one bill that we have in place recommends that in addition to the consumer getting notice of a foreclosure, the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency will also receive notice, so the state can determine when there are hot spots of foreclosure, like the Monroe County situation.
Let me get this straight for our viewers. So then you'll be able to know how many foreclosures there are, where they're occurring, and then if there's sort of a disproportionate number in a certain area like the Monroe County, you can sort of take a look at it to make sure that everything is, what shall I say, according to Hoyle. Correct? You know, go ahead.
Indeed. Then we will be able to act and ensure that that doesn't occur in the future. We can also be guiding consumers and the lenders if we discover a problem in a certain geographic area. We recommend the consumers, of course, call us, 1-800-PA-BANKS.
Okay.
Plus, there's a program in Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania is kind of unique in that sense, called HEMAP, which you may have heard of, the Homeowners Emergency Assistance Program. And the governor has put in new funding since he began office of $34 million into HEMAP to ensure that consumers who, through no fault of their own, be it divorce or job loss or some other situation, can temporarily have bridge funding to help them keep their home during this problem.
Well, I think that's important. I mean, I think a lot of folks got into a mess, maybe some of their own making, maybe not of their own making, but I do think that there ought to be, you know, there's legitimate concern about what happens to those folks, and where the government can, you know, make sure that folks weren't deceived and that the lending practices were appropriate. I know, Rick, that's something that you folks in the Credit Union Association have been concerned with for a number of years. Are there things that you would recommend in terms of ensuring that people, when they borrow, understand what they're borrowing and the terms and conditions?
Well, that's exactly right, Terry. The consumer has to be aware. Any regulatory schemes are helpful, and they do indeed protect the consumer. From there, the consumer with, again, lawyers or trusted people, when they're going to that settlement table, know what it is that you're buying. Make sure you do an honest assessment of yourself. Are you making yourself house poor coming out of the chute once you sign the papers?
Boy, I think that's important. Look, one of the other questions in the remaining time that we have that I wanted to ask is there is concern if we pile state regulations on national regulations, and there's some bills introduced into Congress, Senator Dodd, who chairs the Senate Banking Committee, to kind of ensure that the conditions that produced this subprime mortgage problem don't exist today. Are you concerned about the liquidity in the market, that there will be monies there for people who who want to go out and buy a home? Is that a concern?
Well, I think that's an issue that the Fed is looking at now, and obviously they have their meeting coming up this coming Tuesday, so we'll see whether or not there is any impact with regard to changing the federal funds rate. We believe there is capital in the markets, and we're working closely with our banks and credit unions to ensure that that's the case.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for being on the show.